My mom keeps telling everyone I'm sick when I'm not. She's exaggerating everything and making me feel like I'm losing control of my own life. I don't know if she's trying to help or hurt me, but it's pushing me to the edge and I don't know what to do anymore." Mrs. Peterson hurried through the school's double doors, her eyes scanning the cafeteria with a mix of panic and purpose. She had been called away from her classroom with an urgent message. Her daughter, Ella, had collapsed during lunch. The room was a flurry of concerned faces and whispering conversations as teachers and students made space for her to pass. A crowd had formed around the small, trembling figure of her child. Ella's eyes rolled back, and her body convulsed uncontrollably on the cold, hard floor. The sound of chair legs scraping against the tile floor pierced the hushed whispers as teachers rushed over to help. Mrs. Peterson's heart raced, her breath hitching in her throat. She had never seen Ella like this before, so vulnerable, so fragile. The smell of fear and disinfectant filled the air as she pushed through the crowd, her heart feeling like it might burst from her chest. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice shaking. One of the teachers, a young man named Mr. Smith, looked up at her with a solemn expression. "It looks like a seizure, Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice low and steady. "We've called an ambulance." Ella's mother felt a cold hand grip her heart. Seizure? No, it couldn't be. She had always been such a healthy child. But the reality of the situation washed over her as she watched her daughter's body seize again. She had to be strong. For Ella, she had to be the sentinel she needed. Summary to the power of 1: In a chaotic school cafeteria, Ella, a 10-year-old girl, experiences her first seizure, witnessed by a horrified crowd. Her mother, Mrs. Peterson, arrives and is informed of the situation by Mr. Smith, who suspects it's epilepsy. Despite her disbelief, she must accept this new reality and be strong for her daughter. The wail of the approaching ambulance grew louder, cutting through the tense silence. Mrs. Peterson knelt beside her daughter, her trembling hand brushing back Ella's hair, now plastered to her damp forehead. "It's okay, baby," she murmured, trying to soothe the chaos. "Mommy's here." But the words felt hollow. Inside, she was already spiraling, her mind racing with questions and fears. What had triggered this? Would it happen again? And what would it mean for Ella's future? Ella was rushed to the hospital, lights flashing and sirens wailing. The ride was a blur of panic and confusion. Mrs. Peterson held her daughter's hand tightly, her own trembling matching the rhythm of Ella's erratic breathing. She couldn't bear the thought that she had missed something, that she had failed to notice the signs. The hospital was a whirlwind of tests and consultations. Doctors and nurses moved with a sense of urgency that only heightened Mrs. Peterson's anxiety. They spoke in hushed tones and used words she didn't understand. Epilepsy, EEGs, medications. It was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the quiet life they had known before. Finally, a diagnosis came. Ella had epilepsy, a neurological disorder that would require careful monitoring and medication. Mrs. Peterson felt the weight of the world settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just a cold or a flu she could nurse her daughter through. This was a lifelong battle she had to help her child face. The first few months were a roller coaster of adjustments. Ella started taking Keppra, and her mother hovered over her like a hawk, watching for any sign of another seizure. She read every article she could find, joined support groups, and talked to doctors until she felt she knew more about the condition than they did. But with each new symptom she thought she saw, the fear grew stronger. The whispers of doubt in her mind grew louder. Was it the epilepsy? Or something else? Was she missing something vital? And so began the cycle of endless appointments and tests. Hydroxychloroquine was added for an undifferentiated connective tissue disorder, and Adderall for ADHD. Yet, Mrs. Peterson remained unconvinced. The fear that had started as a small flame grew into an inferno, consuming her thoughts and actions. She became hyper-vigilant, interpreting every sniffle and ache as a sign of something more sinister. Her once carefree daughter now lived under a cloud of suspicion and constant medication. But amidst the chaos, Ella remained a pillar of strength, her spirit unbroken. She bore the weight of her mother's anxiety with a grace beyond her years. And it was in those moments of quiet defiance that Mrs. Peterson began to realize the depth of her own obsession. The realization grew like a seed in the dark corner of her mind, a flicker of doubt that slowly began to crack the foundation of her beliefs. Could it be that she had been wrong all along? That her fear had led her to see monsters where there were none? The thought was terrifying, but the love for her daughter was stronger. Mrs. Peterson knew she had to find a way to break the cycle, to give Ella back her childhood and the freedom she deserved. The cardiologist appointment on Thursday loomed like a storm cloud. It was a chance to set things right, to face the truth she had been avoiding. As she watched Ella sleep the night before, she made a silent vow. No more lying. No more manipulation. They would go together, hand in hand, and she would finally tell the truth, whatever it may be. The next morning, Ella woke up with a sense of dread. She knew the routine all too well, but as they drove to the clinic, something felt different. Her mother's grip on the steering wheel was not as tight, and the tension in the air was slightly less suffocating. When they arrived, Mrs. Peterson took a deep breath. She knew this was the moment she had to be honest. For Ella's sake, she had to face the fear that had ruled their lives for the past 5 years. She held her daughter's hand and walked into the cold, sterile room, the echo of their footsteps bouncing off the walls. The doctor, a kind-faced woman with a gentle demeanor, reviewed Ella's chart. Mrs. Peterson took a seat next to her daughter, her heart pounding. She could feel the words forming on her tongue, ready to spill out the truth. But as the doctor spoke, listing off symptoms and asking questions, she felt the familiar panic rising. What if she was wrong? What if she had missed something? But Ella's eyes, usually filled with confusion and fear, now held a spark of determination. She looked at her mother, a silent message passing between them. It was time to take control of their story. With trembling hands, Mrs. Peterson began to explain her doubts, her fears. She admitted to the exaggerated symptoms, the unnecessary medications, and the way she had allowed her own anxieties to overshadow her daughter's life. The doctor listened, her expression a mix of concern and empathy. As the words tumbled out, a weight lifted from her chest. It was as if she had been holding her breath for years and could finally exhale. She watched as the doctor nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. They discussed a plan to wean Ella off the unnecessary medications and to start seeing a therapist to help them both navigate the aftermath of her overzealousness. For the first time in a long time, Ella felt hope. Maybe they could find a way back to normalcy. Maybe she could start playing sports again, or stay out late with friends without the fear of a seizure looming over her. Maybe she could just be a teenager again. The appointment ended with the doctor's assurance that they would work together to figure things out. As they left the clinic, the sun was shining brighter than it had in ages. It was a new day, filled with the promise of a future where Ella could be free from the grip of her mother's fear and live a life defined by her strength and resilience, not her illnesses, real or imagined. The drive home was filled with a cautious silence, both of them digesting the gravity of what had just occurred. Mrs. Peterson's mind was a whirlwind of regret and relief, while Ella felt a mix of anger and hope. The walls of the car felt less suffocating, the air less dense with the unspoken truths that had hung between them for so long. When they pulled into their driveway, Mrs. Peterson turned to Ella, her eyes filled with a sadness that spoke volumes. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I've been so scared, I didn't know what else to do. I just wanted to keep you safe." Ella looked at her mother, really looked at her. And for the first time in a long while, she saw the woman beneath the layers of anxiety. She saw the love and fear that had driven her actions, and her anger began to dissolve into something more complex, understanding. "It's okay, Mom," she said, her voice gentle. "We'll get through this together." The next few weeks were a delicate dance of honesty and healing. Ella's medications were slowly tapered, and she began to feel more like herself. The color returned to her cheeks, and the light to her eyes. Mrs. Peterson started seeing a therapist as well, to help her navigate her own anxiety and learn to trust her daughter's resilience. Life was not perfect, but it was better. Ella began to reconnect with her friends, going to school without the shadow of an impending seizure hanging over her head. She tried out for the track team, her legs feeling stronger with each step she took. Mrs. Peterson watched her daughter blossom, her heart swelling with pride and regret in equal measure. But amidst the changes, there was one constant, the unbreakable bond between them. They had faced the storm together, and now, as they stepped into the light, they found a new kind of strength in each other's company. They had survived the tempest of doubt and fear, and now, with the truth as their compass, they were ready to navigate the uncharted waters ahead. The house was quieter without the constant buzz of medical appointments and the clinking of pill bottles. The kitchen, once a battleground of forced meals and hidden medicines, became a place of laughter and shared stories again. And slowly, as the weeks turned into months, the fear that had been their constant companion began to fade away, leaving room for joy and the sweetness of a life rediscovered. Ella grew stronger, both in body and spirit, and her mother, though scarred by her own mistakes, grew stronger too, learning to let go of the illusion of control and embrace the reality of life's unpredictable journey. Together, they faced each new day with hope, knowing that they had each other's backs, through every twist and turn, every victory and setback. Their relationship had been tested by fire, and though it was forever changed, it had been forged into something unshakable. And as Ella lined up at the starting block for her first race, her mother watching proudly from the stands, Mrs. Peterson knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it side by side, united in their pursuit of a life lived without the shadow of doubt. Ella's legs tensed, and the starting gun cracked through the air. She took off, her heart racing not from fear, but from excitement and determination. The wind whipped through her hair, and the sound of her sneakers pounding the track filled her with a sense of liberation she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just a girl with a medical condition anymore. She was an athlete, pushing her body to its limits. The race was over in a blur of sweat and cheers. Ella didn't win, but she didn't care. She had done it. She had proven to herself and to her mother that she was more than the sum of her symptoms. And as she jogged over to Mrs. Peterson, panting and grinning, she knew that the victory was not just hers but theirs, a victory over fear and the power of truth. In the months that followed, they faced challenges, both big and small. There were setbacks, moments when the specter of doubt tried to creep back in. But each time, they reminded themselves of their promise to be honest, to trust the doctors, and to trust each other. It was a delicate balance, but with each passing day, it grew easier. Ella's health improved dramatically. Her seizures remained under control, and she began to feel like the person she had been before the endless cycle of appointments had consumed her. She started to eat more, gaining weight and vitality. The dark circles under her eyes slowly disappeared, and she grew taller, stronger, and more confident. Mrs. Peterson, too, began to find her way back to herself. She attended support groups for parents of children with chronic illnesses, learning to navigate the fine line between vigilance and obsession. She found solace in speaking her truth and sharing her experiences with others who understood the depths of her fears. Together, they relearned what it meant to be a mother and daughter, not just a caregiver and patient. They took family vacations, went to the movies without the looming specter of a medical emergency, and even had the occasional argument over something as trivial as who forgot to do the dishes. It was a beautifully ordinary life, and they cherished every moment of it. But the most significant change was in the way they talked about Ella's health. Mrs. Peterson had become her advocate, not her jailer. They discussed symptoms openly, without the heavy veil of deceit. They made informed decisions about treatments and lifestyle changes that were truly beneficial to Ella's well-being. And in those moments of openness and honesty, Ella discovered something profound. Her mother's love had never been about the illnesses she had feared. It was about her, the person she was beneath the diagnoses, a person with dreams, with strength, with a spirit that could not be contained by the walls of a doctor's office. The cardiologist appointment had been the first step in a long journey towards healing. It was a journey filled with pain and growth, but ultimately, it was a journey towards a place where fear no longer ruled their lives. And as they walked hand in hand into a future filled with possibility, Mrs. Peterson knew that she had not just saved her daughter from a world of imagined illnesses, she had saved them both. Ella's first race was just the beginning. She went on to join the school's track team, pushing herself to run faster, jump higher, and reach further than she ever thought she could. With each practice and every competition, she proved to herself and to her mother that she was not defined by her past. The cheers of her friends and the proud smiles from the sidelines became the new soundtrack of her life, drowning out the echoes of her mother's panic-filled whispers. Mrs. Peterson watched her daughter flourish, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and a newfound peace. She had found her voice, the strength to stand up against her own fears, and the courage to face the consequences of her actions. The guilt of her past decisions remained, but it no longer consumed her. Instead, it served as a constant reminder of the importance of trust and truth in their relationship. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, a bond forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the truth that had set them free. They talked openly about their fears and their hopes, about the future that stretched out before them like a canvas waiting to be painted. And as Ella grew into a young woman, she knew that she had not just survived, she had thrived, thanks to the unyielding love of her mother and the power of their shared truth. Years later, when Ella stood on the podium at her college graduation, her mother's eyes brimming with tears of joy and relief, she knew that the path they had walked together had been worth every step. The scars of their past remained, but they had become a testament to their resilience, a story of a mother and daughter who had faced their fears and emerged stronger. And as Ella looked out into the sea of faces, she knew that she was not just a survivor, she was a warrior, ready to conquer whatever life threw her way. The crowd erupted into applause as Ella received her diploma, and she couldn't help but think of that day in the cafeteria, the day that had changed everything. But instead of fear and uncertainty, she felt a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the strength she had found, the truth she had uncovered, and the unshakable bond that had carried them through the storm. They had come so far, and she knew that no matter what the future held, she would always have her mother's love, her own courage, and the unbreakable knowledge that she could overcome any challenge that came her way. Mrs. Peterson wiped a tear from her eye, her heart bursting with pride. She had watched her little girl become a woman, not just survive but thrive. And she knew that without that fateful day, without the struggle that had followed, Ella might never have discovered the depths of her own power. She took her place in the stands, surrounded by friends and family, feeling more connected to the world than she had in a long time. The years that followed graduation brought new adventures and challenges. Ella moved out, found a job, and eventually fell in love. Each milestone was celebrated with a quiet nod to the past, a silent acknowledgement of the journey that had brought them to this moment. And as she built a life of her own, she made a conscious effort to break the cycle of fear that had once consumed them. She sought out new doctors, new perspectives, and a new relationship with her health. Mrs. Peterson continued her therapy, learning to manage her anxiety in a way that didn't impose on her daughter's life. She found joy in her work, in her friends, and in the quiet moments of reflection that had once been so elusive. They both grew into the people they were meant to be, not defined by illness or fear, but by their capacity for love and growth. And when the time came for Ella to have children of her own, she approached motherhood with a newfound sense of balance. She vowed to be vigilant but not overbearing, to listen to her instincts but also to the doctors, and to always, always, tell the truth, both to herself and to her kids. Their story was a testament to the power of honesty and the resilience of the human spirit. It was a reminder that love, when coupled with truth, could conquer even the most daunting of fears. And as Ella watched her own children laugh and play, free from the shackles of her past, she knew that she had not just survived, she had learned to live. To live fully, openly, and with a heart that knew no bounds. The legacy of that one seizure in the 5th grade had been transformed. It was no longer a dark shadow but a beacon of light, guiding them both to a place of understanding and acceptance. And as they grew older, their bond only grew stronger, a living testament to the healing power of truth and the boundless love that had carried them through the storm. Ella's career took her to new heights, her determination and resilience shining in every challenge she faced. She became a vocal advocate for mental health and the importance of honest communication between patients and caregivers. Her story resonated with so many who had suffered in silence, and she used her platform to bring awareness to the complexities of chronic illness and the impact of caregiver anxiety. Mrs. Peterson, too, found her calling. She went back to school, becoming a licensed therapist specializing in the psychological impact of chronic illness on families. She wrote a book, sharing her experiences and offering guidance to others who found themselves lost in the labyrinth of doubt and fear. Her words touched the hearts of many, offering a lifeline to those who felt isolated in their own struggles. Together, they created a foundation, Ella's Run, which focused on funding research for epilepsy and supporting families navigating the turbulent waters of chronic illness. Through 5Ks and community outreach programs, they raised awareness and resources, creating a legacy that went far beyond their own healing. The house that had once been a prison of fear was now a bastion of warmth and laughter. The kitchen that had been a battleground for medicine and meals was now a place of shared recipes and the sweet smell of baked cookies. The walls that had held in their secrets now echoed with the sound of their laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the steady beat of their hearts, forever in sync. Life had not been easy, but they had learned that it wasn't supposed to be. They had faced their demons, embraced their truths, and emerged stronger for it. And as Ella watched her mother age gracefully, she knew that the woman who had once feared for her life had become the woman who had taught her how to truly live. Their journey was one of courage, of learning to let go of what could not be controlled and to embrace the beauty in the present moment. It was a journey of growth, of understanding that sometimes the most terrifying thing is the truth, but that once faced, it could set you free. And as the sun set on their quiet street, the light from their windows a beacon of hope, they knew that their story was not just one of survival but of triumph over the shadow of doubt.